And now, Lifestyles Unlimited presents the Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Over the next hour, we unfold your map to financial freedom. You'll learn how to retire through investing in single-family and multifamily real estate. You'll learn how to create cash flow and build wealth so you can have the time and money to live the lifestyle you want.
Hello and welcome to Lifestyles Unlimited's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, where the hype ends and the help begins. I'm your host, Andy Webb, and I thank you for joining me today. I'm going to harken back to last week's show. If you missed that show, I had planned to hit a number of topics. It was kind of a wide-ranging variety of topics, sundry listener questions, things like that, but I wasn't able to get to one very important question. This itself was a listener question, really a discussion that he and I had back and forth about whether he should invest in single-family rental houses or passively in apartments, in multifamily. So as I mentioned at the end of last week's show, I wanted to get back to this topic, and we will get to that topic today. And it's actually going to tie into my current location. Now, I'm recording this as a video podcast as well. So if you happen to see that online, you might notice my camera's pointing out the window. I'm not in my master bedroom closet this time, back in the sticks and bricks up at DFW. We're actually camped in the RV bunker on the Pedernales River. This is just north of a little town called Johnson City. Johnson City is actually the capital seat of Blanco County. Not named after Lyndon Baines Johnson, you might believe that, but actually named after his uncle. So certainly a relation, kept that in the family. But how does today's topic tie into the fact that I'm sitting here on the banks of this river? What do we do with single family rental houses and multifamily that allows us to travel as much as we like to, right? And then the question might dovetail with that. Which one is better? Is one of those two modalities better for traveling, for what you do, than the other? Now, you may not want to travel like I like to travel. You may have other things you want to do. Just fill in the blank with whatever it is you want to do in lieu of traveling. And that's going to take us down that path, single family or multifamily. And by the way, what else did we discuss last week? If you missed that show, you might want to catch that. We talked about, well, a rite of spring in Texas, protesting those property taxes. Not in depth. We hit a couple of niche questions. And can you protest after the window? Yes, we talked about that. We talked a little bit about the latest ruling from HUD concerning emotional support animals. If you are a rental owner now, you know that's always a kind of a hot button topic. So they did issue a new directive. We talked a little bit about that. That led us into pet fees and pet deposits. What are those? What can I charge? And that led us naturally, of course, from dogs and dog bites to liability insurance and then health insurance. So quite a slew of topics. If you missed it, go to lifestylesunlimited.com. You can find the show archived there. But the one that got away was single family or investing passively in multifamily. And again, I was discussing this with a listener, and I can think of reasons, numerous reasons to invest in rental houses. And I can think of numerous reasons to invest passively. And I'm speaking specifically passively in apartments, in multifamily. And in fact, I do both. So I'll put on my hat for single family when we talk about that. I'll take it off, put on my hat for the apartment investors when we get to that. I've been investing in houses since 2012. So quite a long time now. I self-manage a considerable portfolio of houses around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, as well as a couple of farther flung ones down in the sticks, rural county near Houston. And we've been investing passively. I say we, my wife and I, investing passively in apartments in multifamily since 2020. So we've been at that for quite a while as well. In fact, I did signed a couple of more subscriptions to invest in some apartment syndications. I think my number of apartment syndications are now at parity with the number of houses that I manage. I don't know. We'll have to go check those numbers again. But in any event, we have our hands in both pies. And I want to share some of my perspectives so perhaps you can decide if this is something you have on your mind. Because ultimately, yeah, you might want to get to where you're bumping around in an RV like I am, or just spending time with the grandkids, or whatever it is you can do when you buy back your time and become what we call real estate retired. So we're going to talk about single family. We're going to talk about apartments. Before we talk about how they differ and how those might contribute to that lifestyle that you're looking to build, I want to address, how are they similar? How are they similar? Well, one thing we talk about quite a lot, and you have to understand this because this is one of the reasons why we choose residential rental real estate as an investment platform. because of the financial rewards, because of what they do for our pocketbooks and our wealth. So with a house, let's just start with a single family house. I can buy a house and it's going to create for me cash flow if I'm buying it right? It has to cash flow. Okay. I want to get that monthly cash in my pocket from that rental house every month. And then I buy another one and I stack it and we create cash flow. And that cash flow is actually what will get you to real estate retirement, get you out of that job if you want to get away from that job. But that's just one of the ways we make money. We make money multiple ways with our houses. Add on top of that, when we buy, if we buy right, we create something called equity capture. I'll talk a little bit about this here in a minute. Equity capture is just a big equity buffer at the outset. And I'm not just talking about the cash I've put into that investment. This is equity on top of that just derives through the process. And then on top of that, as we hold this asset, because this is not a flip. I'm not going to add value and sell it. I'm going to add value and rent it and hold on to it. And over time, I will have a mortgage in place. I'll see my equity build up as that resident pays down the mortgage on my behalf. So yeah, they're paying down that mortgage for me every month. It's a wonderful thing. And then we see market appreciation. The market's been a little bit questionable out there with higher rates and fewer sellers willing to sell their house because they've locked into those 2.5%, 3% rates. Because of that, actually, because of the fact that there are fewer houses on the market, values have still considered to go up in a lot of markets. All real estate is local, so you have to look at your local market. But we've got cash flow, equity capture, equity buildup, market appreciation on our houses. We got one other thing with our apartments. This is where they are a little bit different. Something called forced appreciation, where we're forcing value. And this derives from the fact that apartments are valued differently than houses. We'll talk about that here after the break. But we can force appreciation, which is just another wealth building aspect of apartments that drives up our equity. And then there are tax advantages. The tax advantages on houses and the tax advantages on apartments, they share those, right? There's some tricks when it comes to selling a house that may be different than when you sell an apartment with things like a 1031 exchange, but you have access to the same tax benefits. And that can be really important, really big numbers. It's not so much making money as saving the money that you have. So a lot of similarities there with respect to how we make money on our houses and on our apartments. It's very different than what you're doing with your 401k. Maybe you got into the SpaceX IPO and you're just going to wait for that to appreciate, right? Maybe there are dividends. I don't know how that works with a SpaceX thing, but just not making money the same way. We're going to take a quick break. We'll get back and I'll talk about a little bit more on the similarity side before we diverge. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Andy Webb, and I'm glad you're with me today. Hey, we're talking about the similarities and differences with respect to investing in a single family rental house or investing passively in apartments. And this was a listener question, a discussion he and I had. Well, which route should I go? And this is fairly individualistic. There are certain things that will drive your potential direction. Okay, we'll talk about what those will be here in a minute. But I was telling you some of the similarities, because they are both residential rental real estate. And I will tell you, the demand is important. There will be demand. One of the things you have to have, aside from air and water, food, is shelter. So people will always need a place to live. And if you're investing in the right markets to where people are moving rather than where people are moving away from, you're going to see that demand. And we see that, for example, here in Texas. Now, I'm broadcasting today. If you're watching the video podcast, I'm broadcasting from the banks of the Pedernales River, just north of Johnson City. Yeah, it's the capital seat, but it's like population 1,600. So maybe you're not investing there, but if you head a little bit east of here, you're going to get to Austin. Good place to invest if you can get the right asset for the right price. Or go south to San Antonio. We have a lot of members buying both houses and apartments down there. Or go back up to North Texas, where I just meandered from with the RV bunker. Great place as well, because we have a lot of people moving here. And the same is true for other markets where we as members are investing, like Tennessee, right? Our great radio host, Al Gordon, he abandoned San Antonio. He is now in Tennessee, right? He's part of the masses moving in that direction as well. So if you find the right market, the demand will always be there for your residential rental real estate. So financial rewards, very important. That's why we're doing this. The demand and what we're doing. And I mentioned something called equity capture. I want to harken back to this and forced appreciation in particular, because these are really big wealth drivers. Cash flow, it has to cash flow. We want to see cash flow on a regular basis, because that's what really gets us to our real estate retirement, allows us to leave that job and go do something else, whatever it is that you want to do. But we also want to build wealth. And we do that two big ways, right? There are little ways in the background, equity buildup through the mortgage pay down and market appreciation. Sometimes that's big, but typically it's pretty steady Eddie here in Texas. But equity capture can be really big. Forced appreciation can be really big. Forced appreciation is on apartments only. We do not see that on our houses. We'll come back to that. Equity capture, you can see that on apartments, though you tend to see it more strongly, I think, in houses. And the way that works with houses is I find, and in both cases, houses or apartments, we're looking for distressed assets. Sometimes it's a seller that's distressed and the asset's just fine. We love that, especially in the apartment world right now. There are a lot of distressed sellers just due to the type of financing they got a handful of years ago and they need to now sell, right? Sometimes at a loss. And we can really get that asset at a discount. But with houses in particular, what we're typically doing is finding a house that is in disrepair. It does have physical distress, and we get that at a discount because the seller can't sell that just to any, Tom, Dick, and Harry down the road because they can't deal with that. They can't deal with the repairs. In their brains and their minds, it's going to cost too much. But here's what happens. We buy a house for let's say $100K, $100,000. That house fixed up is going to be worth 200 or 225, 250, depends on your market. But we get it for 100. So you see, we already got a big discount there, but we do have to do work. Let's say that work costs us $50,000. We're all in for 150 plus some closing costs. Measure that against that buffer, whether it's 200, 225, 250, that after repair value rather. And what you have there is equity capture. Some of our cash will reside in that property as part of our investment. Let's say 20K. The balance is equity captured. If it's 30K, I've just made a 150% return right there from the outset. Very easy to do with houses. Equity capture with apartments, we tend to see when our lead investor, whoever's syndicating that investment that I'm getting into, they've negotiated really hard and they've gotten a purchase price that's actually below the appraised value. That's equity capture as well. You can get that in houses as well if you buy a rent-ready house that you've negotiated really hard and created some equity that way. Equity capture. Forced appreciation, on the other hand, unique to our apartments. Yes, we are forcing up the value, so to speak, by adding value back through our repairs with that house. Apartments, though, it's different. Our houses, when they're valued based on other comps, other sold comps, comparable properties in that subdivision, in that zip code, in that area, right? So the appraiser is going to look at 3 sold comps. These look like yours. Okay, they're all worth 200. They all sold for 200. Yours is worth 200. Do apartments get valued that way? They do not. Apartments are valued based on their, let's say, cash flow. It's net operating income. It's not exactly the same as cash flow, but let's just say cash flow, layman's terms. If you can increase that cash flow, the value of that apartment will go up. And it's not linear. It's not a 1-to-1. It's usually tenfold if you have leverage on the property. So we can go in and make improvements to the operations. Let's say that seller was hesitant to increase the rents because they're afraid everybody's going to flee if we took the rents up $50. Well, we go in and we take the rents up $50, and the people that are in there, they're thinking about moving. They look around, they say, well, we're still under market. We're still doing pretty well here. I don't want to pay $100 more over at that property, so I'm going to stick around. So we take the rents up and our cash flow goes up and the value pops. That's an easy way to do it. Very common with mom and pop type properties. Or maybe we go in and we add other fees, right? Pet fees. I mentioned pet fees just a minute ago, pet rent, that sort of thing. There's a number of things that we talk about at Lifestyles Unlimited, ways that you can go in and increase your cash flow. Okay, sometimes that's increasing revenues. Sometimes that's decreasing expenses. Very low-hanging fruit like leaky faucets, right? You go in and you fix this stuff. That's part of your CapEx. That's part of your renovations. Reduces your expenses, drives up your net operating income, your cash flow, and your value pops. That is forced appreciation because apartments are valued based on their cash flow. Can't do that with houses, right? So we're limited in that sense. But in both cases, we're able to drive up value and add to our wealth. Now, wealth doesn't get me to real estate retirement, although wealth can later translate back into more cash flow when I divest that asset or the lead sells those apartments and we get our equity back plus more, and we reinvest and we invest in more cash flowing assets that tends to stack, right? You could do that with both houses and apartments. So there's a lot of similarities there. Forced appreciation, very different for apartments. What else? What other reasons might you want to invest as a passive investor in multifamily? Here, I'm not talking about being a lead or being a syndicator, specifically about being a passive. Well, here I am on the banks of the Pedernales River, Do I have to worry about those apartments that I've invested in as a passive? I do not. I'm able to sit here. I'm able to go hiking with my son, with my dog Charlie, who's sitting next to me quietly on the bench happily. Hike around. We went swimming yesterday. The river's right behind us. We'll get the paddle boards out, go paddle boarding once we had heavy rains last night. It was a little bit scary, to be honest with you. Flash flood warnings, all that fun stuff harkens back to a year or so ago on the Guadalupe. But yeah, the river comes down. We're going to go enjoy the river, fish, swim, paddle, whatever. We can do that without worrying about those apartments because we don't control those. We're passive. This is truly a passive investment. Once you get into that investment, now you do have to do some work to find that syndicator, that lead that's putting together the investment, get to know them, make sure you like them, right? Make sure you're on the same page, have similar goals, make sure you like the assets they're targeting, the areas, etc. But once you're invested, there's not much to it. You'll get monthly reports. You read the monthly reports. You say, when's the dividend coming? Oh, here comes the dividend. There's your cash flow, right? So it's a truly passive thing when you invest passively in apartments. Okay, that will allow you to get out and about and do the things we're doing without any worry. Is that true for single family? We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. In fact, I see we're heading up on a break, so I'm going to give you a phone number. If you have any questions, you can call Member Services at 866-945-6565. Again, 866-945-6565, and we'll be back with the show here in just a moment. Stick around. All right, welcome back to the show. You're listening to Lifestyles Unlimited's Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Maybe you're catching the podcast. We've started doing video podcasts as well. You can check out, go to places like YouTube, go to lifestylesunlimited.com to catch our podcasts there or on any of the podcast apps. And if you have any questions for me, we're talking about a listener question, a discussion that I was having with a listener prior to this show, and I wanted to bring this up with you. But if you have questions, send those to me. You can email me at askandy@luinc.com. Again, askandy@luinc.com. And again, the discussion, what were we talking about? Well, the listener wanted to know, am I better off investing in single family houses or apartments? And really the question I need to ask in return immediately is, well, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? What kind of capital do you have? These sort of things will really drive the discussion, but I'm going to speak in broad terms because I have invested in both. So I can present you my point of view anyhow from being a long-term single family investor and an investor, passive investor in apartments. And we were just starting to talk about the fact that when I put my money into a syndication, an apartment syndication, we're talking about multifamily to begin with, it's truly passive. I don't think about the operations while I'm out meandering around, hiking around with the dog and the kid here, right on the banks of the Pedernales. It doesn't matter, right? We just sit back and relax and let someone else do the work. In essence, do we give up some of the returns? Of course you do. Of course you do. They deserve to be paid. I would think you would agree with that. But if you're somebody, I no longer work, right? I became real estate retired a number of years ago, left corporate America happily, hung up my hat, started traveling quite a bit in the RV bunker. But if you're working full time, maybe you're in your 20s, your 30s, you're just starting out. Investing passively is a really good way for you to go because you don't have the time. I hear this all the time from people that they know what we do kind of generally. Well, you invest in apartments or houses, right? One of those things they're not exactly sure and they want to know a little bit more. And then ultimately they say, well, you know what? Forget it. I don't have the time for this. Well, if that's your concern, if that is a legitimate hurdle for you, investing passively in apartments is a great way to go. Your burden really is to get to know those investors those lead investors that are syndicating those apartments so that you can invest with them. Make sure you're a good fit. Very, very important. But if you are working a full-time job and you don't think you have time to manage a single family rental house, and we're going to talk more about this notion here in a moment. Again, I'm way south of where my portfolio sits. How am I going to manage those things if something happens, right? So if that's your concern though, invest passively in apartments. And it's great if you do have a longer timeline because some of the apartment investments have a longer timeline themselves. You know, you may read the prospectus, the marketing material, and it says, okay, our planned hold time, we're going to buy this and we're going to hold it before we sell. Typically they'll say 3 to 5 years there's a range, or they may say 5 to 7 years. I've seen one recently that was 10 years. So you need to know, is that timeline, does that work for you? If you're in your 70s and investing in apartments, do you want a 10-year hold? Maybe you want something shorter. But if you are younger, you can absolutely live with a 10-year hold or longer, right? 3 to 5, 5 to 7. Well, you need to figure out what is it that you're looking for and what truly is your timeline. Some people want things to turn faster because the faster they turn, the sooner I get my equity out, I can reinvest and grow and grow and grow. Okay. Also very important, I mentioned the word capital a minute ago. You do have to have capital, a decent capital base and money, right, dollars, to invest in apartments. Typically, I'll hear the presenters at our 2-day Investor Skills Intensive. That's a 2-day seminar where we dive into single family houses on day one. You're going to learn everything you need to know to go and invest in a single family house. Dive into apartments day 2. And they're going to say, hey, if you got $70,000 to maybe $100,000, that's a good capital base to start investing in apartments. How many apartments can you invest in? You know, some syndicators at Lifestyles Unlimited will accept pretty low dollar amounts to invest with them. I saw one syndication that I'm in. This is from a number of years ago. There was an investor that invested $10,000. Not too bad, right? Commonly, the minimum is 25. It may be 50. I've seen one that was 250. I didn't want to put $250,000 in that syndication, so that wasn't for me. You can figure that out too. So if you have a smaller capital base, yes, you can do apartments, but then you may be waiting for a little bit for that to turn, for that to churn, for you to then grow. And that takes me to single family, because if capital is an issue, single family rental houses are a really good way to grow your capital base, especially if you do want to segue at some point, like we did, into apartments. We started buying houses in 2012. We weren't flush with cash. My wife worked, I worked, we had some savings, right? We were planning to buy our own personal house, so we'd saved up a little bit at the time, but we weren't flush with cash. So we didn't feel that going straight into apartments was the right way. Plus, we wanted cash flow to get my wife out of her job, and that worked phenomenally. Got her out in 3 years. It was a wonderful thing for her. But houses, right? You can build that equity by equity capture, what we talked about already. If I buy a house for $100K, invest 50 to renovate it, to bring it back to the modern era, to fix everything that was broken now or could break in the next handful of years, I may drive that value up and get a 150% return on my equity from the outset. So I've invested 20 and now I have an additional 30K in equity. In other words, I have 50K in equity that I'm sitting on. Do I have to hold that for 10 years like that apartment investment that I looked at? No, I don't. That's one of the nice things. Single family is not truly passive, not fully passive, because you are in the driver's seat. You get to decide when you want to sell. And if you've gotten a home run in terms of equity capture from the outset, maybe you hold that for a shorter period of time, divest, reinvest, whether that's houses or now you start to shift some of your cash into apartments. That's for you to decide. But you can really grow your capital with houses. So if you do have a lesser amount, that's where I would tell you, go start. Now, this investor, he had more, the gentleman we were talking about. So again, his quandary, single family or apartments. I will tell you as well, with single family, one thing I like, there's simply put a greater pool of assets that I can find. It's simply easier to find and buy a single family rental house than apartments. You know, as a passive investor, I'm dependent on others to find those apartments. If I wanted to be what we call the lead, I've got to go find them. And it's definitely harder to find an apartment to invest in than any given single family. So there's a greater pool of assets. And then when I do want to sell, there is a greater pool of buyers. I can sell to another investor, but I can also put it on the open market. And yes, I know the buyers are a little bit squirrely right now, but it's not going to stay that way forever. In fact, I put a house on the market over in Mesquite, 35 days, done, right? So some markets are moving, okay? So greater pool of buyers when you do decide to sell, and you're not just simply selling to investors, which an apartment investor naturally has to do. Right, just random. Again, Tom, Dick, and Harry aren't going out off the street and buying some 20-unit apartment community. They're going to be sold to another investor, and in essence, that makes houses more nimble. I can move a lot more quickly, and they're not just more nimble from the point of view of buy, fix up, hold for a year and a day, 2 years, 3 years, and sell. They're also more nimble from the value add perspective, because I want to create that equity, and I do that at the outset by adding value through my renovations. Think about this. You go and buy one house that needs $50,000 in work. How long does that take? Depends on the work, of course. Maybe the city and permitting and all that stuff, but we might be talking a couple of months maximum for $50K in work. Now let's just multiply that times 10. Let's say I've got a 100-unit apartment community that we're investing in. My lead is investing in. I think numbers look good. I'm going to go and put my money in as a passive. And they've got a $500,000 rehab budget. Is that going to take 1 to 2 months to complete, to drive up that equity, to force that appreciation? No, that's going to take longer. So the business plan, again, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, whatever, the hold times tend to be longer. So the houses, from that point of view, are also more nimble. It's just so quick to turn those things and get to that cash flow much more quickly on a rehab house, right? And get to that equity quicker as well. Final point of view for me as a single family investor is control. As a passive investor, I control which investments I participate in, right? I choose if I want to invest with you, Mr. Lead, or you, Mrs. Lead, your deal down in San Antonio, your one up in Speedway, Indiana, or wherever. Beyond that, I don't have control. I don't choose when we sell. I don't choose when we refi. I don't choose who we put into unit 1B or 11A over there. As a single family investor, I maintain control. I make the decisions, and so can you, including when to sell. And that's a very, very important consideration. Again, especially if you're building capital. Okay, so some of the differences, some of the things you can think about with respect to single family rentals and apartments. When we come back, we're going to compare these in a little more depth and maybe get you that answer that question, which is better? Stick around. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Andy Webb, and we're talking today about single-family rentals, investing in houses, and investing passively in apartments. Which is the best route for you? And of course, that's going to come down to your goals. And we've talked at an upper level about some of the things you might think about with respect to investing in houses, with respect to investing in apartments. I'm going to quickly kind of summarize these here, some of these key points. Number one, the level of passivity. Okay. Like I said, apartments, purely passive. Once I find that investment I'm interested in, I'm familiar with the lead, we know each other, I've gotten to, communicate with that lead investor where we've got similar goals. Great, invest, set it and forget it, right? And then wait for the distributions, wait for the eventual, perhaps a refi. We've had several that have done cash out refinances midstream, and then the eventual sale of that asset. Then you reinvest and continue to grow that portfolio. With our houses, we didn't talk about this so much, but they are less passive in that you do maintain control. You decide, you're the one in the pilot seat. Which house am I going to buy? What kind of rehab will I do? Now, we lean very heavily on our general contractors, on our team as investors. So I'm not really deciding a lot. They know what we like. They're familiar with the Lifestyles Unlimited model. They've been around for a while, these contractors. So just lean on them and let them make the decisions for the most part. We talk about these things, of course. They know what we're looking for. But beyond that, then we have to find the residents. Now, you can do this yourself. You can hire it out with a leasing company. Now, when I'm managing my houses in Dallas-Fort Worth, yes, I'll market that. But if it's my farther flung properties that are down near Houston, no, I hire a leasing company. Let them do that. Now, ultimately, the decision, who am I going to put into that property, what applicant will become my resident, that falls back to me. I don't want someone else making that decision because I have particular criteria, and we have that printed on paper. Everybody signs that. But we're making those decisions. Okay. So it is less passive. Okay. Than apartments. Now, is it completely hands-on? No. I'm, again, broadcasting from the banks of the Pedernales River. By the way, if you're wondering, where is the Pedernales River? If you try to look this up, you're not going to find it on a map. We pronounce things kind of in a strange way sometimes here in Texas. It says, we pronounce it Pedernales. It's spelled Pedernales. It's near Johnson City. Anyhow, we're here. Anyhow, even though I self-manage my single-family portfolio, how does that work? Okay. Different levels of passivity, I suppose. Now, cash flow per door. How does that compare? Well, one single family house, if you just measure it per door, tends to have a higher cash flow. And you keep all of that cash flow because you are the owner of that property, you're the manager, whatever. It's all going into your pocket. When I invest passively in apartments, as I mentioned, that lead gets some form of compensation. So they're keeping a little bit of the profits, right? And the rest flows to the investors. But already there, we're giving a little bit of that away. The bottom line, cash flow per door on an apartment community is lower. It just simply is. So if you're really focused on cash flow, you might want to look at houses to start out rather than apartments. Okay, that's what we did. That's why my wife and I went the single family route to begin with. So passive, level of passivity is different. Cash flow per door will be different. The wealth building angles can be different. That forced appreciation lever that I can leverage in apartments can be phenomenal. And you just don't have that in houses. So that is something to look at as well. Now, a lot of the apartments that we've seen lately are not big value add investments. That's really where you're forcing appreciation. The ones we've been seeing lately and that we've personally been investing in are more what are called yield play. They're more cash flow plays. We're going to get cash flow early on, just like with our houses. So there is a spectrum with apartments. We talk about that at the 2-day seminar at the Investor Skills Intensive. So that may be something you want to go to just to internalize some of the differences within the apartment modality. But the wealth building angle is much stronger, in my view, in apartments. You can just simply park more cash, grow more cash, etc. Though there are some pretty big equity capture plays in the moment with single family. So you've got to weigh those. Again, you can get to that equity faster with those houses as well because you are in control. Okay. Capital. How much capital do you need to get into one single family house compared to apartments? It varies. Okay. This is where you have to learn how to do the numbers, how to run your numbers and set your own investment criteria. Don't just invest in any willy-nilly house. I want the house that meets my criteria or exceeds my criteria. But in order to find that house, I need to know what my criteria are. We've talked on other shows about that. You can go to lifestylesunlimited.com and listen to some of the older shows there. But the capital required generally to invest in a single family house will be lower than in apartments. Now, that doesn't mean you're excluded from apartments if you feel like you're a little bit lesser on the capital side. As I mentioned before, some lead investors, especially for first-time passive members at Lifestyles Limited that are investing passively, they'll say, hey, we'll lower the bar a little bit for you. We want you to be comfortable. We want you to get into your first investment, or maybe it's your second. And there have been times personally where I say, I want my capital for something else. I see that you said $50K, Mr. Lead, but I'm interested. Will you do 25? Can you negotiate like that? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. So the capital bar varies on both sides, but generally speaking, you'll need more. You're going to want to have more for apartments than houses. And that's where houses come into play to help you build up that capital if the ultimate goal, and this goes back to goals for you, is to get into apartments, to be fully passive. I've known so many members that went that route. Start with houses, build up the portfolio, build up the cash flow, become real estate retired, start to sell those houses and move that pot of income or pot of equity over here into apartments. Great way to go. Great way to go. Control. If control is important to you, well, single family is going to be the better way to go. Because if I'm a passive investor in apartments, I don't have a say in what happens beyond. There are certain voting rights, so those are outlined in the operating agreement and in the private placement memorandum, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, passive is passive. In apartments, passive, we call our investments in single family passive as well. It's just lesser because we do maintain some control. We make decisions. So if control is important to you, go the single family route. If you're a type A that can't give up the reins and you invest passively in apartments, you will pull your hair out. But do you just have to invest passively in apartments? No, you can be a lead investor too. So if you do like the control, maybe that's the route for you to go. And that's a different show. All right. But control is something you want to think about. Other people's money. Can you use other people's money with your single family investments? Absolutely you can. And we talk at length about the fact that I can invest in far more houses if I put debt on the property. I can be in that house for $20K out of pocket rather than $150 if I pay all cash, or $70 if I used, the 20% down conventional type lending. If I follow the Lifestyles model, buy with hard money, do the repairs, refinance into the 30-year fixed rate debt on the back end, much lower out of pocket, I can invest in more property. So using other people's money, great. I could do that with single family investments. Can I do that with apartments? No, I'm not going to be able to borrow money to invest in apartments as a passive. Now, granted, yes, the lead investor that's putting that syndication together will be using leverage as well. So you are indirectly tapping other people's money as well. So lots of things to think about with respect to single family versus multifamily. The last thing I want you to think about is the level of risk. And it is higher. Let me rephrase this. You do take on more risk as a single family investor because the loans that you are getting are recourse loans, meaning they point back to you if something happens. If there's a foreclosure, yes, that will wind up on your credit report. Do we have a lot of those? No, because there are so many ways, and this is a topic for a whole other show as well. So many ways to mitigate risk with our single family houses, just like there are plenty of ways to mitigate risk with multifamily. And that's the job of the lead. For you, the passive investor, what is your risk level? Well, let's say I just signed a subscription and I said, I'm going to contribute $25,000 to this wonderful investment opportunity. You're going to double my money, cash flow out the door, whatever. What's my risk? It's at $25,000. I'm not on the hook for anything above that. I'm what's called a limited partner. We use the term passives. Out in the broader apartment industry, typically passive investors are called limited partners, LPs. The leads are called general partners. And you are limited as a limited partner to your capital invested. I've been reading a lot of private placement memoranda as I've been seeing some stuff coming across my desk, subscribe to a few. Every time it's in there, right? Your risk. By the way, it outlines pages and pages of real estate risk, but we can mitigate. A good operator is going to be able to mitigate a lot of those risks. So back to the question, quick sip of coffee here that we were discussing with the listener. What should he do? Single family or multifamily? Is it black and white? Let me ask you that. Do you have, he has some capital to deploy. Do you have to do one or the other? Why not do both? Personally, this is me speaking from my perspective. I like having both single family properties in my portfolio and passive investments. As I mentioned, I think my number of houses versus my number of passive investments in apartments, I think we're at parity now. So we're going to see who's going to take the pole position next. But I like that because with my houses, I do maintain control. I do determine if I want to pull out that equity. If I need the equity for something, some other investment, maybe my wife says, I'm tired of driving this 2011 beat up junker RAV4 that she's been driving. I want to get a new car. Well, maybe we pull some cash out, right? We can do that. We have the control. We can fully divest that asset if we're done with that and want to move on to the next one. So I like that about my houses. Is it a problem for me broadcasting today from the banks of the Pedernales River? I did have a maintenance request come in since I've been down here. Did I get in my truck and drive all the way back up to Dallas to deal with that? No. Even when I'm in Dallas, I don't drive across town to deal with that. I have a team. I just took that maintenance request. I sent it over to the HVAC, AC, right? We're in summertime. Sent that over to the AC guy. Hey, go take a look at this capacitor, whatever it is, change it out. Done. So some control, but generally it's pretty passive. If you're doing it right, if you put the right team in place, the right controls, single family, pretty passive. But I do like to balance that with passive investments in apartments as well, because somebody else has control. They see the vision. They have the vision. They're managing that. So I've got two things operating in tandem. So again, as I open the show, we're broadcasting today from the banks of the Pedernales River. If you're watching the video podcast, you can see out my window, got a neighbor there and looks like a pop-up RV. I can't quite see the river from here. It's swollen. We got a ton of rain, but how does single family, multifamily tie into my travels? Passive multifamily would be easier, but I love that control. I like having that cash flow from my houses. That does allow me to travel, and I can self-manage from the road, and you can too. So which is better for you? Lots to think about. You think about that, and if you have questions, you can send me an email to askandy@luinc.com, and we'll talk again next week. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to Lifestyles Unlimited's Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Ready for more of the map? Visit lifestylesunlimited.com. Explore our videos and articles. Click on the radio tab to access past show podcasts. View the radio show schedule and listen to our best of radio shows. Want to continue the conversation? Follow Lifestyles Unlimited on Facebook today. We want to meet you as well. Sign up for a free workshop at lifestylesunlimited.com. Until next time, remember, it's not the money, it's the lifestyle.
The information and opinions you hear on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this station, its affiliates, its management, or advertisers. The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.